welcome back to her.
And I'm him.
And in this month's episode, we're continuing in our series about the 12 elements of healthy relationships. And in this episode, we're going to be focusing on the topic of boundaries. And so the article that we used to kind of guide our discussion had a little bit to say about boundaries. And so if you don't mind, go ahead and just read what the article says about boundaries.
So I'm going to read the boundaries. Boundaries are physical, emotional, and mental limits of guidance a person sets for themselves, which others need to respect. You and your partner or friends should feel comfortable in the activities you are doing together. All individuals involved should be respectful of boundaries. Whether it's romantic, sexual, or platonic, consider what you want the relationship to look like and discuss it with others.
All right, and so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about boundaries. And so we know that often people have ideas about what types of permissions they should have in certain relationships. And when you start to set up boundaries, sometimes it can cause a little friction because others don't understand why you're keeping them out of certain spaces in your life or why you don't offer certain information. And so, first of all, when you hear boundaries in relationship, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
When I hear boundaries in relationships, the first thing that comes to my mind is, do I respect you? Because, whether you set boundaries and I know about them, or you set boundaries just because. If I respect you, then I respect your boundaries. But in knowing that you have boundaries, I need to know what they are.
And so I think that's a very valid point that you bring up. If you have certain limitations that you want to impose in your relationships, you need to be upfront about it. You need to say that, for example, I don't take phone calls after 10 p.m. and anyone who calls after that time then is not respecting that boundary you have, right? So as we've been discussing in our previous conversation, there are different types of relationships. There are relationships that you have with friends, there are relationships you have with families, there are relationships that you have with romantic interests. And so let's start off as we did before, talking about boundaries with friends. And I want to know, have you ever experienced a time where you had a friend who did not respect the boundary that you set?
That would be remembering certain conversations or certain instances. I will say this, friends that don't respect the fact that you may have a girlfriend and call you whenever, will get you in trouble. And I remember a friend caused my situation, a lot of pain because she left her keys
She left her keys where?
in my car.
Why she was in your car, first of all?
First off,
See? There you go.
first off, she left her keys, and I tend to think it was on purpose because she wanted me to find them.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, she couldn't get into her place without the keys. So I moved on. I had somewhere else to be, and then I realized the keys are in my car. So I had to go back to her. But the problem that was created was my girlfriend at the time found the keys.
See?
I didn't even find the keys. My girlfriend found the keys. So she ruined that particular boundary because now I can't even deal with you. I can't, if you're losing and leaving your keys, what else you gonna leave? You're gonna leave some hair. You're gonna leave some panties,
Okay, so that's a great point that you bring up though, because in certain relationships, there may be an expectation that, if you're dating someone, maybe there should not be another person in your car at a certain time or on a certain day, right? And so depending on when this person was in your car, if it was in after hours and that type of thing, and you moved on, you go heading home, and all of a sudden you got these leftovers. It's like, well, what were you doing all day with this other person? And that causes a lot more questions to arise. And so I think that it's important to know that if there's an expectation that you don't have any company in this relationship, at certain times, and you respect that as a boundary in your relationship as well.
I think it's important to have honest communication
Hmm.
and as well as be an open book. And I wasn't hiding the fact that I had a friend because this friends have been a friend for a long time. But at the same time, my girlfriend at the time did not like the friend.
And you still hanging out with her? See,
Yeah, I
you
did.
was asking for trouble.
Well,
Mm-mm.
I mean, that's part of why she's an ex girlfriend now. Because you can't control who someone has as a friend versus so on. I mean, that's just out of respect, though, out of boundaries, though, you would try to, side with your man or your woman.
Okay, so that brings up a great question. I want to pose this to the audience. So, if your person that you're dating doesn't like a certain friend, does that mean that that friendship should end? Or should that person grow up and say, "This is my friend and you're going to have to deal with it"? I wonder. I mean, I've had lifelong friends, and I've had situations where those friends are no longer my friends because my best friend, he was my best friend since I was 15 years old. And he started dating a particular person, and he felt like she wouldn't understand our relationship. And so, because he didn't want to have those arguments at home, he just stopped calling me. And I was like, damn, it's like that. I thought we was homies. But he was just like, my girl wouldn't understand our relationship. She probably would be jealous about, how close we are. And so rather than have those arguments, he just opted to be like, I holla.
I think it's tricky, but as a mature adult, I think that it's also important that we make our decisions based upon individual decision. Like, don't make it for your partner or your mate just because they not messing with the person. Make it because you saw something in that person or you don't like something in that person, and then decide, okay, I can't be friends. Like, the example that you gave is tricky because if the person called you tomorrow, you might still be their friend. I mean,
I
it
mean, we
won't.
are still
Yeah,
friends. In fact, I've seen him occasionally,
yeah,
out and about. We live in the same city still. We still have common friends and mutual friends. And so occasionally we'll see each other and I say, hi, how you doing? How the kids, all that good stuff. But I've never met his girlfriend because he doesn't feel like he wants us to meet. He feels
and
like she
that's
would not
tricky
understand our
too.
relationship. And I'm like, why? But yeah.
That's tricky too because maybe he has something down in his brain that he thinks the relationship is like. Maybe he was using your face, to find a happy place. I
Oh,
don't
Lord.
know. Like, that happens. I'm sure celebrities got deal with it all the time. Janet Jackson, Halle Berry, all of them deal with it. Because they don't know what they can't control what that person is using a face for. But at the same time, if that person is making decisions based upon that face, yeah, no girl is gonna understand that. I mean, like, I don't expect you to understand it. You might deal with it, but you ain't gonna understand it. So that's one of the boundaries that do definitely get guys or women in trouble. And I think it's important that they what they got that friend for.
Hmm.
Know why you got the friend.
Okay, so I can't really think of anything else with friends per se. I think that with, for example, my girlfriends, I think that they know that there's a certain level of respect they have to have when they're around you. They don't wear certain things. They may not interact with you in a flirtatious way, that type of thing, because they respect the fact that we are together. And same thing with your male friends. I think that there's a certain level of respect that they have when they're around me. They may not, you know, do certain things that they do when I'm not around or whatever. And I think that's a boundary that they have as your friends and respecting our relationship.
A lot of it is communication with guys.
Hmm.
The communication changes when the wife or the significant other is around, and rightfully so. Like, they don't want to be crude or talking about women in a bad way, so they won't talk about it at all, and that's cool. I think it's important to understand that I don't know if women do the same thing because women never talk like that around me, but
Yeah, but no, I was thinking more so with respect to, for example, they may hug their friends, but knowing that we're together, they won't hug me the same way that they hug other people. That type of thing.
right,
You know what I'm saying? It's
right.
not necessarily a communication thing, but it's just they tailor their behavior because they understand, that's off limits.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think it's important to kind of be that way because I know, certain guys with wives, you know, the watch is pretty.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be like the guy that's kissing Beyonce on the lips. Like that was inappropriate, you know,
Yeah.
or anybody for that matter. So yet no, I won't act like that if it's somebody's wife. Now I have been known to be a little touchy, a little feely, and I try not to be touchy and feely around you because you may not understand why I'm being touchy and feely. Like me and that
Okay, so you said around me. So that means when I'm not around, you're gonna be touchy feely?
depends,
So this is my thing though, because whether I'm there or not, there's always somebody watching.
right?
And so do you take into consideration that the fact that I'm not there gives you the license to do this? Because whether I'm there or not, you're still my husband.
Absolutely. And no, that doesn't give me the license. Meaning, if you're there, I won't even like hug the person, or maybe the
Why
hug.
not though? Because
Hold
this
on,
is my
listen to
thing. If
me.
you like to hug people, then hug them. Why do you become a different person just because I'm there or I'm not there?
So, for the audience out there, for guys, for him, meaning I won't hug the person in a way that I might hug them if you're not there.
Why though?
And
Because
that,
my thing is you should be the same person whether I'm there or not.
no,
Now, if you're
no.
changing when I'm not around, then that makes me think, what else will you do when I'm not around?
So, guys, I think it's important that
Ladies,
you
y'all feel me?
listen. I think it's important that you understand that there's years of relationships, and relationships take on a level in a life of their own. So, if I am not with you and I hug somebody, I might hug a little longer. I might hug a little deeper. I might even grab. But I won't do that if I'm with you.
But my point is why do it at all if you can't do it when I'm there?
Yeah, because the reason why you do it is because you don't have a chance to do it when you're there. That's it.
So that
That's just
means you
being
still want
100.
to do it though. So my thing is if you still want to do it, then not doing it when I'm there is kind of like a deception almost because you're
It
giving a
is.
portrayal
It
of
is
who
deception.
you are
Yeah.
when that's not who you are.
It's very much deception, and I think it's important that you communicate that to your husband or wife prior to, so they know who you are.
But this is my thing. If I know my husband is a flirtatious person, he's just a life of the party type of guy. He's going to go talk to the other women. He's going to even talk to the other men. And so I expect that when I'm out with you because that's your personality,
Yeah.
then me understanding who you are, I'm not offended when I see it. But if you're hiding it from me and then I happen to catch it and I'm like, you never do that when you're with me. So
So
why did I catch you doing it?
so
Now it
hiding
feels
it
differently.
so by hiding it and respecting boundaries is two different things. I ain't hiding from you. I'm just respecting your boundaries. I'm not
But
gonna
are
do.
you if you do it when I'm not there? Because if you're
Oh
respecting my
yeah.
boundary, you respect it regardless of whether I'm in front of you or not.
Well, that depends. I mean, if you're not there, then that's like when we had a conversation about communication. Some things you tell your girlfriend, some things you don't tell your husband. And I agree, and I also say some ways you act around your wife or husband when they're there and when they're not there. And it's not being, sneaky or whatever the case may be. It's just respecting the boundaries. Hey, my wife is with me tonight. I'm not going to grab your ass.
But that's interesting though, because I would expect that, hey, I'm married, so I'm not going to grab your ass, whether my wife is there or not.
That's true too, but at the end of the day, sometimes you just want to grab your ass.
So my thing is grab it while she's there too. Be who
What?
you are. Don't be deceptive.
And that's where the communication comes in. If you can grab the ass when your wife is there or husband is there, then you can grab the
Well, that's a
ass.
whole nother thing though. See, this is my thing though. I want to be who I am regardless of who's in the space. I want to be the same person when you're around and when you're not. Now, I do know that sometimes it's unrealistic because unfortunately people don't always make that comfortable or make that able to be, right? I do know, for example, that when I'm on vacation with my girls, I tend to be a little freer because I don't have you in the corner lurking. But at the same time, I would love to be able to be the same free person, whether you're standing in front of me or not. And so, how do we get to that point where we can just be who we are, regardless of? Why don't you turn your ringer off, babe?
Yeah. That's a tricky. Hold on. Let's take a quick pause so I can.
All right. So this is the question: how do we create an environment where we can be the same regardless of who's around and who's in the space? We can always just be our authentic self.
You know, that's a good question. I think that the audience kind of would chime in on it as well. But I would say that you are who you are, and you want that to always be presented, right? And so whether you're with your wife or you're by yourself, you are who you are, and you see what you see. I think that the space is created with good communication. If that person knows who exactly the person is, then they're not surprised when they see certain things. That's why I always kind of laugh at, when you find out like the person is a pedophile. Like you already knew that person was a pedophile because they touched your kid in an inappropriate way and you didn't do nothing
I don't know
about
about
it.
that. Sometimes they hide it very well, but yeah.
So, if the person is hiding who they really are very well, then like Bernie Madoff, you telling me those boys, his sons, didn't know that he was scamming those people? At the end of the day, I like to look at it this way. If the person doesn't know who you are, then they didn't really get a chance to know you.
And that's my point. So, for example, I know that you like titties. So, if we're out in public and I see you look at some titties, it doesn't offend me because I know that's what you like. Now, what you do after you notice it, that might be called into question. So, it's like, okay, you look, you saw, you admired. Now, don't act like a fucking, salivating
Don't be
wolf.
a
And
pervert.
I'm just saying. So I get it. And so this makes me think of that conversation about men who they have a woman who's hot who dressed a certain way that caught them, right? And then all of a sudden once they're married, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, you can't wear that anymore, you can't do this anymore because you're my wife now. And it's like, no, I'm still the same person, and for you to expect me to be different now just because we're married is not fair of you. Now, yes, there is a certain level of respect that you have as this person's partner, but at the same time, to expect this person all of a sudden to become a prude when you know that they're not a prude, that's why you love them, is unfair.
And I think that that's an important part of this because, that's a boundary that has to be thought about.
Mm-hmm.
That's a boundary that has to be respected. That's a boundary that it takes some time to kind of figure out. Because if you liked it then, you should like it now.
Not
So,
necessarily. I mean, people do grow and change, but you understood this about that person, and so for you to expect them not to be that person anymore is just unfair.
yeah. Okay. Well, that's true.
Yeah. Okay, so then what about, we talked about friends, boundaries with family. Are there any boundaries that you believe should be set with respect to family, or how do you respond when family set boundaries with you?
So, as far as boundaries set with family, I believe there should be boundaries set with family. I don't respond well to boundaries set by family members because I tend to think that they don't respect my boundaries.
Mm,
Now, I have a good example with my brother that I always kind of come back to. People used to let him walk in the room and not say nothing to nobody, and I'd be like, why y'all let this man walk in this room and not say hi, not say anything, just be quiet? And they was used to it. And I go, y'all setting the wrong boundary. Like at the time, I was younger, but at the time I thought, like, who does that? Well, fast forward to the fact that, me and my brother don't communicate, and I thought, well, that's fine. But my brother is still communicating with my family, like certain people in the family. And that kind of bothers me because I go, you know what? He ain't talking to me, but he talking to you. Like, what kind of boundary are y'all setting? You should say to him, hey, how come you haven't called your brother, or call your brother first before you talk to me? That's the way I feel. But that's just me.
so he set a boundary with you where he won't take your phone calls, but he
Correct.
talks to everyone else.
All right. Or just a couple of people.
No, I'm just
But
saying, but he talks to the other people though. Yeah.
exactly. And I thought, well, that's some BS because to me, if you are talking to, people that I know, family members that I know, and that I still communicate with, you should be able to talk to me. Like there's nothing that I've done that there's nothing that's too big.
Well, I mean, and so that's your perception of it,
Right.
though. And so I think it's interesting because, I mean, there are certain family members, I love them to death, but when you go around them, it's drama, it's this and that or whatever. And at some point, sometimes you just say, I don't want to be, I don't want to subject myself to that anymore. And I'm not saying that that's the case with you all, but perhaps there's a certain energy that, is there when you guys are together and he just decided that he doesn't want to be around that anymore.
And he has that right, and
Hmm.
that's why I don't. I don't worry about it from that standpoint because that's his right. Like it
Hmm.
isn't a reflection of you or me per se, but like I just think it's wrong. I think it's off. I think it's a little bit too much. But
Yeah.
hey, that's his deal.
Yeah, it's interesting. Um, just boundaries in general, I feel like they're so subjective, and people have these different ideals about what things should look like and how things should feel and all of that. And at the end of the day, you know, they have a right to say, yes, I want to be around this person. No, I don't want to be around this person. Yes, we can interact in this way, but only to this degree. All right, so we've talked about boundaries with friends, we've talked about boundaries with family members, and we know that at the end of the day, boundaries are necessary because they're pretty much the rules of engagement. So people will say, I'm comfortable in this way. And when we interact, this is how I would like to engage with you. And if you can respect that, then usually it becomes a good relationship, right?
Yeah.
And so, with respect to romantic relationships, what are your thoughts about having boundaries in romantic relationships?
I learned a long time ago that you have to be a friend first
Hmm.
in order to get to the romantic part of the relationship. And I think it's important to understand why you become friend, what boundaries are set to become friends, because you don't become friends with everybody. And so in a sexual relationship, you don't have sex with everybody. Some things just don't work. And so people have to understand why they, what their types are, why they would, put the boundaries up on a friendship. A lot of times friendship can take years to build, to grow, to manifest into the next phase of the relationship. So that's the way I've always learned it. And I hope that guys that are listening to me out there understand if she ain't your friend first, she probably ain't gonna be your lover for life. Like you can grow into that, but chances are not good.
It's interesting because I think about, for example, there are things that one person may prefer that another person doesn't, right? And often what happens is when people get comfortable, they fall back into what their preferences are, and they kind of disregard the preferences of their mate or of their significant other.
I've done
And
it.
so, well, I mean, I think it's a natural progression. Sometimes you just get comfortable, right? And so, as a person who wants to be authentically themselves, you have to feel safe enough and have a safe enough space to be able to say, I don't like when you do this, or I'd prefer if we could do this instead of that. And be able to say, I really don't like that. I don't like when you speak to me in this tone. I don't like when, whatever it might be, right? And feel safe enough and feel valued enough to know that the person loves you enough that they'll consider you as they continue. And it's not about trying to change a person per se, but it's just being able to express, when you do that, it makes me feel this way. And so I prefer if you didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, and especially when it comes to speaking to, uh, the person, any old kind of way or disrespectful. Listen, when you are speaking in that manner, that means you're either upset or you don't know how to communicate well. And so we have to take a step back and understand when that person requests that you not speak to them that way, then you're obviously not communicating well. And so learning how to communicate at times where you know you're upset is important, because you might be upset all the time, and you just talking any old kind of way to anybody. Like, come on, man, that ain't gonna work. You get beat in the head, talking any old kind of way to anybody.
To the wrong person, right?
To the wrong person. Um, I think also it's important to understand that all feedback isn't bad feedback. Some feedback is good, and when you set the boundaries to receive the feedback and to understand the change and to understand why there's boundaries being set, then you can achieve more. Like, listen, you can achieve whatever you want to achieve if you're listening and learning.
I agree. It's really interesting because, as you mentioned before, a lot of times, people change, they grow, right?
Yeah.
And so, what do you do when something used to be a boundary and now it's not, or something that didn't bother you now starts to bother you? How do you navigate that? Because then the person says, well, you acting different now, you brand new and all that kind of stuff, right? And it's like, no, but I've grown. When I was younger, I tolerated X, Y, and Z, but now that I'm a little older, a little more mature, I don't feel the same about that anymore. And so I just wanted to express that, and hopefully we can be on the same page with that.
I equate that to change.
Hmm.
We should all be changing and getting better and learning. And I think that it's important that we change in a positive way, not a negative way, a positive way. And so when you tell somebody, or when somebody says, oh, you act in such and such, hey man, did you change? Like, okay, think about yourself first before you start telling somebody else what they doing. Because at the end of the day, like, you have to be willing to change, you have to be willing to make yourself better, and then see where the chips fall. I think also that it's important for men to understand that things aren't going to always stay the same. Like, they're not going to be what they used to be when y'all first started dating. That's what I call a marriage. Okay? Let's be clear. Like, you just have to continuously grow and understand that each other is growing and learning and changing. And I think once you realize that, then you respect the boundaries, respect the timeline, that whatever is put in front of you, you respect that, because you know it's fast. It happens quickly.
You just made me think about something. Oh, that construction. Lord have
They
mercy.
banging
We
away.
decided to come outside, but oh, it's a lot going on out here. But anyway, the fact that this, although, we're growing and changing together, this is also a personal journey, right? And so remembering that, you know, you as a person are not perfect, and that a lot of times the things that bother you are things that probably are indicative of something that's going on inside of you,
Yeah.
something that you might need to work on within yourself, versus always going to the other person and asking them to do something different. And so taking that time to first self-reflect and think about, what is it that I can do to be better in this area? What is it that I can do to become more tolerant, possibly? What is it that I can do to mitigate whatever I'm feeling before I reach out and say to the other person they need to do something?
Yeah, it's important because what happened to us recently. I had to call my friend and say, "Man, do you have to come at your house?" And I think it was about the cigar smoke and the smell. And so I asked him. I said, "Man, outside of soap and shower and getting rid of the smell and brushing your teeth," I said, "Does like the cigar come out your pores? Does it emanate?" Because I didn't know, and I had to ask him. I said, "Does your wife ever complain about you smelling like cigar?" She said, "No, she doesn't." I said, "Man, my woman's senses are heightened because she's smelling everything. And cigar smoke, whether it's in my hair, my clothes, whatever the case may be, she smells it, and it doesn't, react well to her senses." And I had to tell him. I said, "Well, I don't want this to go away, but I want to understand it. Is it me or is it her? Like, is she oversensitive or am I undersensitive?" And so I was trying to figure that part out. But again, That's looking within. I
Hmm.
didn't just accuse you of being oversensitive. Well,
And
maybe I did.
my sense of smell is pretty keen though, and I'm
Yeah.
sensitive to smells, and so yeah, and especially it's an intimate moment, and you turn over and you go, some guard breath. I'm like, whoo, Lord, back up, but
Don't turn over and smell like a cigar. You won't get none. You won't get a kiss. You won't get no hugs. Trust me, it's a tough world. You might look good bossing up, but then when you kind of go and get close, it ain't the same. It ain't the same.
Oh man. But I mean, are there any last words that you would like to leave with respect to boundaries, setting boundaries in any relationship, not just a romantic relationship?
Yeah, well, I don't remember what I said before,
It's
so
okay, because they
so
don't know either.
oh, gotcha.
Lord have
So
mercy.
um, I don't remember, so you're gonna have to take it from here.
No, what would you like to say about setting boundaries?
That's it. I don't have any. I can't remember what I was
You
gonna
don't
say.
have to remember. Just think about boundaries.
That's
Why
it.
are boundaries important? Are they not important? Do
For
you
what
consider them? Like, summarize. This is in
boundaries?
conclusion.
Boundaries are very important. I think it's important for relationship growth. I think it's important for change and health. You have to continue to grow, otherwise you'll die. And we know that life is quick. We don't have to hit you with the cliches, but I look at boundaries as one of those things that continue to respect each other, continue to understand where the other person is coming from so you can be better.
Yeah, and I just want to say, because something you said earlier sparked this in me, that boundaries are the rules of engagement for any relationship. And it's important that you're upfront about what your boundaries are and that you're clear about your boundaries are so that the other person doesn't feel like they're being caught off guard by them, right? And so you say, this is how I am willing to interact with you. These are my terms of engagement. And then, they either choose to abide by that or they don't. And if they don't, then it won't be much of a relationship for much longer,
Yeah, relationship will end quickly,
right?
sooner than later.
So either respect them or be gone. Yeah.
I'm him.
And I'm her. And this has been her and him. We'll
We'll
see you
see you
next time.
next episode.